my FPL Game Week 17 final team selection decisions. In today's video, we're going to have a look at everything you need to know going into Game Week 7 to make your final team. We'll discuss whether Matheus Cunha is going to be available this week, and we'll have a look at some key injury news because we have had some big news to some players that mean there are some cheap enablers that you might want to be bringing in this week. We'll have a look at my team, whether I'm going to go with the -8 after some of that injury news. We'll talk about captaincy and everything you need to know for your final Game Week 17 team decisions. What is up, everyone? FPL Harry here. Before we dive in, 2,000 likes is the aim. Subscribe if you're new around here. And diving into the key question, the number one thing you are asking, is Matheus Cunha going to be available for the game on Sunday? At time recording, we've just had the Wolves press conference. Basically, we don't know. The Wolves manager said, I'm not sure. He is an important player, is basically all that he said. Of course, that press conference was mainly focused around him being the new manager of Wolves. There wasn't that much asked in detail about the situation. We've then heard from a Wolves sort of reporter that they are expecting him to be available. At the moment he is available. They have not heard that he has been suspended or that he has been banned. Now, the only thing I would say on that is from the way that it was tweeted, it makes it sound like they never appealed the ban or never appealed that he has been charged. And if they decide that a ban is what they're going to give him as a result, there is a chance that it might happen between now and the deadline. However, at time of recording, we do still believe that Matheus Cunha is going to be available for Wolves away at Leicester, and that is a fantastic fixture for him. And he might have a point to prove and a sort of performance to put in before a potential ban over the next couple of game weeks. So at the moment, Cunha is available. Next up is there are lots of potential -4s flying around this week, and you have asked me to discuss my general thoughts on taking hits at this time of the season. Now, as a manager, I tend to be pretty cautious, although I am looking up some potential hits for my team this week. I generally do my best to err on the side of caution and not take that many -4s for your team. Now, if it benefits your team, and of course it is team specific, then I don't mind it, particularly if you think it benefits your team for the long term. -4s and hits rarely pay off in a specific game week. They rarely will pay off exactly this week unless you get massively lucky and it impacts your captaincy decision, for example. But if it impacts your team for the long run, like I hope that my -4s or -8s might do this week, then yes, I have no problem with you taking hits in your team. I wouldn't do it every week, but I don't think it necessarily is something to be put off if you do one or two every so often. Then we're having a look at the Captaincy Ranking. Mo Salah is number one. He did have the midweek off in the Cup. They, of course, go up against the Spurs, which had a well-fought victory against Manchester United, where they did put out a pretty full-strength team, although did make several defensive errors, and I think Liverpool will be able to capitalise on that. Next up, we've got Cole Palmer. Everton are actually a team which can be a little bit difficult to break down, but Chelsea do look pretty good going forward at the moment. Alexander Isak in the form he is in number 3 again. Away at Ipswich, maybe not the most easy fixture with the way that Ipswich have been defending and playing at home, but I do think the Newcastle are in a great run of form at the moment. Next up is Bukayo Saka in at number 4. Again, he's not been that great in the Premier League, but has been scoring goals in the Champions League, and I do expect Arsenal to get back to goal-scoring ways in the Premier League, and he is, of course, at a focal point of that. Number 5, and it's actually, if he is going to be available, of course, a slight asterisk there that we don't 100% know he is going to be available. But if Matheus Cunha is going to play away at Leicester with the way they're defending, he's not the worst captaincy shout this week. However, generally, I can't really look past maybe 1, 2, and 3 in this list. Normally, all top 5 are maybe good picks, but generally, I think Salah is an obvious captain, and he will be my captain this week. Palmer, if you don't want Salah, I don't think I'd be captaining Haaland, continuing again with the way they're playing at the moment. Then moving on and having a look at some injury news. First of all, Eze is going to be out for Crystal Palace going up against Arsenal this week. They'll also be without Munoz, who is suspended. This does mean they will likely be much weaker going forward, with 2 of their sort of attacking players, one being a wing-back and one being one of their number 10s, to be unavailable, which does boost the Ars defence if you do own them. Next up is a big piece of injury news from Fulham, and that is Kenny Tete is going to be out for about 8 to 10 weeks, which will likely rule him out until March. Several game weeks he'll be missing, and that means Timothy Castagne at 4.2 will likely be filling in, and he is then a very, very good buy into your teams at the moment if you are looking for a defender to buy this week. We'll actually rank him higher than Anderson, who we don't fully know if he's going to be available, although has been pictured back in training, and I'd rank him higher now than Robinson because of the 0.6 saving you now have on the other Fulham defender. And then it is looking at the Chelsea defence. It looks like Badiashile and Fofana are likely to be out for a while, which means Tosin Adarabioyo, who did play the last game and played pretty well, is likely to fill in. Now, if they don't sign a centre-back, Tosin could be a good one to look to buy. He's good in the air. He has that aerial threat where he could score a couple of goals and had a chance in the most recent game against Brentford, but it is possible that Chelsea do go in for a centre-back in January if the prognosis of Badiashile and Fofana gets worse. Then to Brentford, Vandenberg and Pinnock both went off with injuries midweek. Vandenberg, we don't know quite how long he's going to be out for. It's not quite as bad as the Pinnock injury. Does sound like the game this weekend is likely to come too soon, and then the games do come thick and fast, so he might end up missing a week or two, but it doesn't sound like he's going to be out for months. However, that could well be the case for Pinnock, who does have a hamstring injury. We haven't been given exact timelines on either of these Brentford injuries, but it does mean they're likely to miss the game this weekend, and Pinnock is likely out for a while. That does boost the Nottingham Forest attack, though, if you look to buy Chris Wood this week. Then we move to Manchester City, and Ruben Diaz is likely to be out for 3 to 4 weeks, returning mid-January. Stones and Akanji have returned and could be back this weekend, although it does seem unlikely. That does mean whilst that Diaz is out, unless Stones and Akanji both return soon, we might see Gvardiol playing in at that centre-back role, where he is, of course, less attacking if you own him. As a result, then, having a look at the best players to buy, David Raya remains the best goalkeeper to buy with the fixtures they've coming up and how good Arsenal are defensively. Alisson, with the fixture this week, of course, drops down slightly, but still a good buy if you want to go in on the Liverpool goalkeeper. Fabianski, number 3, as a great cheap option with Brighton at home this week, and my favourite long-term keeper now returns to Henderson of Crystal Palace, who starts to look a lot better. Those 3 centre-backs in front of him, Lacroix, Mark Guéhi and Chalobah, are really starting to build a good partnership. It is Arsenal at home this week, which is why he's not higher up the list, but if you need a cheap goalkeeper now, he's probably at the top. Into defenders, there's actually no real need to rush and buy Liverpool defenders now, so Arsenal are at the top. We've gone with Gabriel in at number 1 away at Crystal Palace. Timber, number 2, if you want to double up. I would put him above going with someone like a Saliba. I'd probably put him above a David Raya as well. Calafiori, we're not certain how long he's going to be out for, and then that means that Timber has a lot of places in that back 3 that he can line up with. We've then gone with Timothy Castagna in at number 3. I'd put him above Anderson, and I'd put him above Robinson. He's just 4.2 million now. Robinson up to 4.8, I believe, so I would be buying Castagna as the cheapest option in their defense over all of the others. Trent Alexander-Arnold, if you have the money, I'd still don't mind him away at that Spurs team, who are conceding a lot of chances at the moment. If you need a cheaper option, it's Lewis Hall or it is Levi Colwill if you don't want to buy Timothy Castagna. But generally this week, if you're looking to buy a defender, it's either Arsenal or Castagna for me. Moving into midfield, we've removed Salah off the list just because most of you own Salah now, so there's no really point in me recommending you buying him. If you don't own Salah, still look to go and buy him. Palmer in number 1 now. Saka in number 2. Still, my favourite midfield is the one that contains Salah, Palmer and Bukayo Saka. My favourite cheap midfielder is Ahmad. Just seeing what he did again midweek, he is a very nice price. He's likely to come into my team this week. It won't be number 4. I think he's a great pick, but I probably would go with Ahmad over him and save the money. Ismail Assar is number 5. His underlying data is actually the best of all of those cheap midfielders. The issue is he has Arsenal at home this week. From next week, the Crystal Palace fixtures start to get really nice and he'll probably bump up the list. And then number 6, we've gone with Enzo Fernandez again, a really nice cheap option and actually rotates pretty well with a lot of those other cheap options. If it's Sarr, if it's Ahmad, if it's Iwobi, or you've gone with a Morgan Rogers, Enzo does rotate pretty well. You can't really go wrong with a lot of those cheap ones. You shouldn't really be expecting a return every single week with the price that you're playing at, but Ahmad would probably be the one that I would go with now. Then we're moving up front. Of course, no Wolves in here. Matheus Cunha is a nice hold if you do own him, if he doesn't get the suspension before the game this weekend. Alexander Isak and Jackson are the number 1 and 2. We've gone with Isak number 1, just the way that he is so focal to what Newcastle are doing. He is on penalties as well, which boosts him over Jackson. If you don't have the money for those 2 to go and buy, Chris Wood is probably number 3, particularly with the injuries that Brentford do have this week. I would put him above João Pedro. Of course, there is a bit of money difference between those 2. And then the number 5 is the cheapest option, and that is Raul Jimenez of Fulham. The only reason he's probably not even number 3 or even higher in this list is just the uncertainty of minutes over the Christmas period. The Wolves manager has basically said he rewards players who do play well, and that was Muniz, who played well and scored in the game against Liverpool last time out. I do think Jimenez probably starts, but then they do play Chelsea on Boxing Day, so there is, of course, a small chance that they save Jimenez for that fixture and they play Muniz in this one, or that, Muniz plays the one on Boxing Day or in Gameweek 19. There is likely to be a bit of rotation in that Fulham team, which is why Jimenez is not higher up the list. Having a look at the benching rankings that we've got here, generally in terms of goalkeepers, it's depending on what you own in terms of where I'd put Fabianski. So in terms of Fabianski, Flecken, Alisson, Sanchez and Raya, I'd probably play over him, but with a nice home fixture against Brighton, I'd probably play Fabianski over Bruggen, who's playing against Pickford Henderson, and then Martinez as well. In terms of the defenders, I'd play Robinson of Fulham over Trent, but generally the Liverpool defenders I would start over most other ones. Spurs are slightly better defensively from set pieces once they've got Fraser Forster in goal, but generally they're still not that great from them, and they don't have their first choice centre-backs. So I would play Trent and Van Dijk over the likes of Lewis Hall, Porro. Then it's Colwill, then it's Aina, and then you've got the Manchester City ones with the injuries they have in their defence. Moving up front, Matheus Cunha is a definite start if you do own him. I would start Iwobi, I would start Smith Rowe, I would start João Pedro over most of those cheap mids, and I probably would still be looking to start Strand Larsen, particularly because Cunha is available. If we hear that Cunha is unavailable, it would probably knock Strand Larsen slightly down the list. Looking at the projections for this week, Liverpool are projected to score the most goals with 2.4, but it is very closely followed by Fulham. Hence, a lot of people looking to buy Castagna, Robinson, Iwobi, Jimenez, or even Smith Rowe as well. Again, if you're looking at Fulham mids, Iwobi feels like a definite better buy than Smith Rowe, who has dropped off in terms of form a little bit. Chelsea also predicted to score 2 goals, although away at Everton is not always the easiest fixture. Newcastle also up there with 2 predicted goals, as with Manchester United. In terms of predicted clean sheets, it is a little bit more difficult. No team is hitting that 40% threshold that we look at every week. Arsenal and Fulham getting the closest with 38% each. Then you have Chelsea in with 34%. Clean sheets are a little bit more difficult to predict this week because a lot of the teams we'd like for clean sheets tend to be away from home, apart from that Fulham one. At home Southampton, who might have a little bit of a bounce with a new manager. So then having a look at my team, and let's talk about the -8, because the Castagna update, where Castagna is likely to be playing for Fulham for a while, does give a little bit of a boost and potentially change a few things. It does look like Ahmad is likely to rise in price tonight, so I will have to make my decision before this evening. I've already used my 2 free transfers, so I'm definitely going to be taking at least a -4, if not a -8. The reason the -8 is slightly less locked in is, as I said in the video yesterday, is that if we get news that Anderson is likely to be available, I could just do 8 Nori to Anderson and roll the second transfer. Now, there is part of me that thinks now, well, Castagna is a better pick than Anderson, so I could just do 8 Nori to Castagna and not use the second transfer. However, I do think I want Ahmad in my team over Morgan Rogers for the longer term. Now, the only issue with that is I don't necessarily think it's worth a hit this week. So I could do 8 Nori to Castagna and then do Rogers to Ahmad next week, for example, and still do the Ahmad route, but just do it for free. The only issue with that is it doesn't mean I have Munoz. I do like Munoz for the long term. Of course, he's suspended this week. So I could just do 8 Nori to Castagna, or I'm going to do the -8. So I'm almost certain that 8 Nori is going to go to either Munoz or to Castagna before the deadline. It's just whether I do it to Munoz, and if I do, then Rogers will have to leave for Ahmad tonight in order to free up the money. I'm pretty 50-50 on it. Part of me does really like what Crystal Palace are building and how good they look, and think maybe if Southampton score with a new manager, that maybe that, sort of doesn't mean the Fulham defence is quite as good, because this is the real fixture that you're looking to buy them in. However, if I do the Munoz move, of course, I'm forced to play Mykolenko this week, basically. So it does massively strengthen my team this week to just go to the Fulham player. And maybe that's what I need in my team this week, to just do 8 Nori to Castagna for a -4 and reevaluate next week. So I will post on Twitter and Instagram and stuff if I decide to make transfers tonight. 8 Nori at time recording is predicted to be really, really close to dropping. Ahmad is definitely predicted to rise tonight. So I'm almost certain I'll have to make my decision and my transfers this evening. Captaincy is on Salah as he's top of my ranking. If I don't do the Ahmad move, which I do think I'll probably do, Rogers versus Enzo is pretty close. I probably would just about go Enzo over Rogers though. But then I do have triple Chelsea attack, which might play into my mind a little bit. So just to recap that, I've got 2 decisions. Either I do 8 Nori to Castagna, and if I do that, I'm not ruling out doing Rogers to Ahmad, although I'm not certain it's worth a hit in isolation. Or I do Rogers to Ahmad, which frees up the money for 8 Nori to Munoz, who I do think is a better long-term buy in general over Castagna. But of course, Castagna massively boosts my team this week. If I had to put percentages on it, I'd still say, because it's a -4 anyway, and I want Ahmad, and I think Munoz is better, I'd say I'm 60% likely to do the -8. I would say I'm 30% likely to do the 8 Nori to Castagna move only, and 10% likely to do 8 Nori to Castagna and Rogers to Ahmad, because the -8 there doesn't feel quite worth it, because the Ahmad transfer doesn't free up any money that I actually need. So that is all for the final decisions video. Of course, we'll be back with a Game Week 17 deadline stream at the usual time of 9 a.m. on Saturday morning. Make sure you subscribe, click the notify button up above to get a reminder when that does go live. Thank you so much for your support. If you have any questions, drop it in the comment section down below. If not, come and join that deadline stream on Saturday morning to get your questions answered, and let's see if I make those final bits of transfers. Thank you all very much for watching. 2,000 likes is the aim. Subscribe if you're new around here, and I'll be back again very soon.